What's going on? How are you doing? Congratulations. Thanks. I was wondering a couple of days ago. I said, guess I want to be with them.
Hey Dave,
It's a small world.
after this is over, can we see
I have a forensic anthropology degree. I like that stuff. Awesome. I know in person.
Okay.
I never even been to Ohio. So I know in person.
Now, this is just the ones that were
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm saying that's some of them.
You know, everything I know about how she did this was hilarious.
I just wanted to congratulate.
Well, thank you, I appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate it. So you still same place?
Yep.
Same city?
His wife had surgery. I said, I'm going to call you.
He's kind of like build it back. His
No, it's
bed,
rich.
he's in that. Because they're not.
People get confused.
Yeah, they're all.
Sydney.
Sydney's in Shelby.
Right.
That's what it was. So Shelby, yeah. That's what I was thinking.
People call all the time. And they're like, yeah, we're on this road. And we need to please. What road are you on? Quick call down here.
Yeah.
go to the phone and say like,
Hey, good seeing you.
Love you too.
All
All right. Okay.
sound check on the camera?
Oh, you don't see me at all?
Just turn the phone off. You know,
Okay,
turn
Dave's
it
in
off.
my phone, so.
5 minutes, I think. How many times? We have 7 minutes.
And the bordering states. This one started as a possible match to a person who was missing from
We got a couple minutes and we'll get started, make sure everybody gets here.
Matt is watching, he said, fill them.
I talked to Greg Ross, if he's got some additional information, I'll hook you up with the number with the way you call him over to him.
Okay, cool.
That's too much of a coincidence.
I know.
Okay, so we'll build it up. We are not restrained. Can we be restrained? Were they like good for me at home?
We'll see you in the parking lot, Dave.
I thought it was her phone. Like your car?
She gets in here and you start.
Who is that? Is that news or
On Facebook, I didn't want you guys, I didn't want 30 minutes bus or anything.
You can sit anywhere.
Oh, yeah.
You can sit anywhere. All right.
Like everybody's here? Everybody ready? News me? Okay, I want to thank everybody for coming today, and welcome to Preble County. Is the family members here?
Yes, yes.
Okay. And first of all, the family members that's here, and want to extend our condolences. And the other thing, I also think we owe you an apology too. I'm sorry that it took this long. But the ultimate goal when we started this was so that we could provide the family closure. And I've been involved probably in 6 or 7 exhumations. I've been doing this for 49 years. And we take these things very seriously before we ever disturb a grave. But after meeting with Adam all the times that we did and gathering the information, I went to our microfilm department, and within 15 minutes, Erica had me a file this thick that was done by our former coroner's investigator, and he did most of the investigation on it. And but they really couldn't come up with nothing. And of course, the body was sent for an examination, and to come back all this time was an unknown female, which we entitled John Doe. And exhumations, another reason too, they can be very expensive. Like I said, I've done it several times, and it can get quite expensive. And but after, like I said, talking with Detective Turner, him providing the information, and then so I met with our county coroner, Dr. Mark Vossler. He can give the authority to do the examination, and also met with Katie Worthington, the assistant prosecutor, who provided the legal information that we needed to go about this. And so after talking to Dr. Vossler, he says, "What have we got to lose?" I said, "Nothing except maybe a little money." And he says, "Well, if it's going to provide the family closure," he says, "do it." So at that time, got with Adam and we started preparing. And I made a call to Brad Collins at the city, and Brad Collins graciously waived all the costs involved, the opening and closing of the grave, the workers from the city that provided the day that we actually did the exhumation. We got a state rep here, Rod Creech, who at the time was a county commissioner, and I had went to the county commissioners and said, we have a very small budget in the coroner's office, and didn't know what we was going to run into. And the commissioners at that time told me if we had a problem that they would be glad to help us out and get this accomplished. And so after digging up the information that I did, and the only information that was available was from the former investigator in the coroner's office, Tim Miller. So once when I found out where was what funeral home had done the burial, which was Barnes Funeral Home, and Bob's old like I am, he was around at the time that she was taken care of, and their funeral home took care of her. I got the records that he did that really didn't expect to get anything from it because they didn't know anything, only what the coroner's investigator provided. And so we then, but I was interested in what type of casket they used, because no matter what we did, if we brought this up, I thought that she, at the time, deserved to have a new casket. So we had that reserved, and Ron Gard went over and picked up a casket. He stored it for us until we was ready to use it. And we went ahead with the exhumation. And Eli Montgomery from the sexton of the cemetery, this was a difficult task. Back in the day, these graves aren't properly marked. Am I correct, Eli? And Barnes Funeral Home, for whatever reason, had a couple pictures. And based on them having the pictures, and Eli had a general idea where the person was buried at, and with his expertise in probing the ground and doing whatever they do, he located it, and lo and behold, when we dug it up, it was the right one, thank God. And so with the pictures and everything, we was able to accomplish this, and BCI was there. They was going to take over whatever bones they needed to do possible DNA and whatever needed to be done to try to identify this person. And so at this time, I just want to thank everybody who's involved. If I forgot somebody, I apologize. And I'm going to basically turn it over to Detective Turner from Shelby PD. And like I said, folks, I've been a detective for a long time. I've done this for a long time. And I don't think I met anybody more persuasive. And the guy doesn't know what the word no means. And he wouldn't give up on this, where a lot of others would have just said to hell with it and been done with it. He didn't. He kept plugging along, and he left no stone unturned. And believe it or not, there's still work to be done in this case, and he might touch on that a little bit. But right now, I'm going to turn it over to him. He's the man.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. My name is Adam J. Turner. I'm a detective for the city of Shelby, Ohio. Shelby is in Richland County, which is about 10 miles north of Mansfield. Mansfield will be a midpoint of an imaginary line between Cleveland and Columbus. It's about 167 miles from here to Shelby. Because this case began in 1968, I have a lot to tell you. And because it took a vast amount of people to get where we are today, I have a lot of people to thank. All of whom were very instrumental to getting to the resolution that we did. If you have any questions, please hold them till the end. I'll be glad to answer them, or one of my colleagues will. Briefly about me, I started with the Shelby Police Department in 2007. In 2012, I began working for the Springfield, Ohio Police Department until 2016, when I became an enforcement investigator for the State Medical Board of Ohio. In 2018, I returned to the Shelby Police Department, and I am now assigned to the Detective Bureau, where I investigate a gamut of criminal cases, both at the misdemeanor and felony level. I earned my bachelor's degree in criminal justice from the University of Toledo, and my master's degree in criminal justice and forensic science from St. Leo University. Gives you just a little picture, help you find out where Shelby is. So how did we get here, and why is the Shelby Police Department involved? Well, in October of 2018, we received communication from Mindy Wilson, who reported that her maternal grandmother, Mary Jane Croft Vangilder, was missing and was last seen in 1945. Mary Jane was originally from Fairmont, West Virginia, but had moved to Ohio in 1944 to work at the Wilkins Army Air Force Depot in Shelby. The Wilkins Air Force Depot opened in 1943, and it was a warehouse that distributed more than 40,000 different parts for World War II. It was decommissioned by the government in 1961. Mary Jane lived in Willard and Plymouth, Ohio, both of which are in Huron County, which is directly to the north of Shelby. I searched our old police files, and I was unable to locate any investigation or mention of Mary Jane Croft Vangilder. Shelby Police Chief Lance Combs contacted the Plymouth Police, who affirmed that they investigated the case briefly in 2004 after being contacted by Mindy's sister, Misty Griner. In the late 1940s and early 1950s, Mary Jane's eldest daughter, Anna Mae Rager, had written letters to the Marion County, West Virginia sheriff, who in turn had wrote letters to the Plymouth Police Department asking for assistance. Anna Mae also wrote letters to the Ohio State Highway Patrol, the Treasury Department, and the FBI. She would always receive generally the same response, that no trace of her mother could be located and the federal government would not assist in local law enforcement matters. About a year after Mary Jane started her employment, she abruptly resigned, citing added household duties. No trace of her has been located since. Through my investigation, I was able to locate Mary Jane's military file and letters that Anna Mae had wrote to the FBI in the 1940s and into the 1950s. While I was able to obtain her Social Security number, something that we did not have before. The documents did not indicate where Mary Jane might have gone after she left her employment in 1945. Believing that Mary Jane could possibly be a Jane Doe buried somewhere in this country, I searched NamUs. NamUs is a database of many of the missing and unidentified people throughout the country. This system allows law enforcement, coroner's office, and the general public to potentially match Jane and John Does to reported missing people. Using parameters specific to Mary Jane, I searched Jane Does found after 1945 and using her physical characteristics. I included the possibility that Mary Jane lived after 1945 and then became an unidentified person at some point later in life. In the NamUs system alone, there were cases that piqued my interest, as the unidentified person had similar physical traits as Mary Jane, or the circumstances surrounding the discovery of the unidentified person could be a candidate for Mary Jane. I then would reach out to the coroner's office or police departments who oversaw the case, and unfortunately, a lot of these departments were not open to the possibility of exhumation for DNA purposes. Others scoffed at the idea of working a 1945 missing persons investigation, while others simply would not return my phone calls or emails. Because NamUs is not completely comprehensive, I then searched findagrave.com and located a newspaper clipping from 1968 indicating that a Jane Doe had been found in Eaton on May 25, 1968, in a drainage ditch after a strong rain by children Brian and Bruce McFall. This Jane Doe was not in the NamUs system. According to the article, the Jane Doe was a Caucasian, 5'2" to 5'4" in height, and estimated to be around 35 years old. A dental plate found near the body was estimated to be 10 to 15 years old. Theorizing that Mary Jane might have moved to the area to be close to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, then still called both Wright Field and Patterson Field, I reached out to the Preble County Coroner's Office and was put in contact with David Lindloff. Dave was a wealth of information and quickly became a strong ally and partner in determining if Mary Jane and the Jane Doe found in 1968 were the same person. Mr. Lindloff had located an old coroner's file titled Miss Ditch 1968. Unfortunately, the dental plate, the photographs, and the tissue samples from the original investigation had been lost to time. The original coroner in 1968, Dr. Richard Seal, and coroner's investigator Tim Miller had since died. At the time of the finding, it was questioned if the remains could have been washed out from a pre-existing grave at a cemetery. However, no cemeteries reported grave washouts in the area. Local dentists were contacted at the time who stated that the dental plate was made after World War II. Not cheap, costing somewhere between $150 and $175, possibly made by an older dentist and having been repaired multiple times. The autopsy showed that the remains were again estimated to be a Caucasian female, weighing approximately 132 pounds. No signs of trauma or animal activity were noted on the remains. Dr. Batson, who conducted the original autopsy, believed that the body had been at one time buried in wet ground and deceased had been dead for a number of years. Based on the condition of the remains and some identifiable characteristics, but the full body was not intact and it was badly decomposed. It was determined by the condition of the pelvis that potentially the person did not have any children. But if there had been, there would have been severe complications. Mary Jane was the mother of 5, but did have 2 twins die in infancy for unknown reasons. I spoke to Brian McFall, who as a child had originally located the Jane Doe. Mr. McFall provided several newspaper clippings along with 2 color photographs of her casket, where she was buried at Mount Hill Cemetery on September 9th, 1968. He stated that he remembered his siblings were playing out back of his childhood home when they discovered the body. He told me it was of a younger woman, and some skin was still attached to the body. Again, it was eventually concluded by investigators at the time that the remains were 10 to 15 years old at the time they were found, which would put the date of death between 1953 and 1958. Age was estimated to be around 40 years. Between the years 1953 and 1958, Mary Jane Vangilder would have been between 42 and 47 years of age. Like Dave said, an exhumation can be costly. However, in this case, the city of Eaton and the cemetery officials worked together with the Shelby Police Department to exhume the Jane Doe at no cost to the city of Shelby. The location of the grave was located using a plot map and 2 color photographs taken in 1968 by funeral director Robert C. Barnes of Barnes Funeral Home and provided to me by Mr. McFall and Curtis Hodson. Mr. Barnes is right here in the front row. Thanks for being here. On August 28th of 2019, we exhumed Preble County Jane Doe. The grave was dug via backhoe and then by means of hand tools. The bones of the Jane Doe were underneath a layer of silt and sediment. The original casket had completely disintegrated except 4 metal handles. Those are the pictures taken by Mr. Barnes, and then the plot map there is on the right-hand side. That's us get started. As you can see, the vault is completely intact, something that we didn't know if it would be, but we were thankful that it was. Ohio BCI arrived on the scene and entered the grave. The bones were then carefully photographed and extracted. BCI took femurs as well as multiple digits of the feet and hands for processing. They appeared optimistic about the retrieval of DNA from the remains. On July 25th, 2020, I was told by BCI that DNA was attempted on several of the bones, but that they were unable to get a usable DNA profile due to the age of the remains, and that it possibly needed mitochondrial DNA testing since this was the most sensitive technique available. Due to COVID and staffing, this process was ultimately delayed. On January 12th of 2021, I received results from BCI in regards to the Preble County Jane Doe. Essentially, the report stated that there was male DNA present in the bones. Now, this could be from a male contributor or due to contamination, not necessarily that the bones were of a male, although this remained a possibility. I was told that due to the poor condition of the remains, the identification would be extremely difficult. I knew going into this that the likelihood of Preble County Jane Doe being Mary Jane Croft Vangilder was low. However, all agencies agreed that whoever was found off Frederick Drive in 1968 needed identified and their name restored. We remained undeterred by the daunting task of identification and continued forward. On January 14th, 2021, I received notification from BCI that they were done with the mitochondrial DNA testing, and a partial profile was obtained, which showed the remains were not that of Mary Jane Vangilder. For the rest of 2021 and the beginning months of 2022, the remains were sent to several laboratories for DNA extraction and sequencing. However, because of degradation, no usable DNA profile was able to be obtained. In June 2022, the Shelby Police Department partnered with Moxxy Forensic Investigations to complete investigative genetic genealogy. And today with me is Katie Thomas, Casey Conley, and Olivia McCarter, and they are owners of Moxxy Forensic Investigations. The remains were sent to Intermountain Forensics in Salt Lake City, Utah, for additional extraction and sequencing. Danny Helwig, who owns that company, wanted to be here, but he had something come up at the last minute. The remains had to go through multiple extractions and 2 rounds of sequencing, which cost around $5,000. Generously, the business Criminal Coffee, owned by Derek Levasseur and Stephanie Harlow, fully funded the necessary DNA testing for Preble County Doe. Derek is a television personality and private investigator from Providence, Rhode Island. He is best known for winning the reality television series Big Brother 16 in 2014. Prior to Big Brother, Levasseur was a police officer in Central Falls, Rhode Island. Derek also co-hosts the podcast Crime Weekly with Miss Harlow. Sabre Investigations, LLC conducted the bioinformatics for the DNA kit upload. On December 28, 2022, I received a phone call from Miss McCarter. She informed me that the Preble County Jane Doe found in 1968 was in fact not a female, as originally deduced by Preble County's officials at the time, and that the remains were of an unknown male. In subsequent months, Moxxy Forensic Investigation advised their research showed, through the process of investigative genetic genealogy, the following. That the unknown individual was a child of Ava Catherine Berryman. That's her up there at the top. And Martin Van Buren Frost. That's him underneath. Both of Hamilton, Ohio. Together they had 8 children. Of these 8 children, all the females were determined not to be this candidate due to the unidentified individual being a male. There were 4 males born to the Frost. All of the sons, with the exception of 1, had a confirmed death date through available public records. On March 29th, 2023, Moxxy Forensic Investigations informed me that the unidentified remains were that of Albert Allen Frost. Albert Frost was born in Hamilton, Ohio on January 25th, 1935, to Martin Van Buren Frost and Ava Berryman. He had 7 siblings: George, Clara, Moses, Anna, Robert, Bernice, and Mally. Albert was the youngest out of his siblings. Albert's father died in 1959, and his mother died in 1993. All of Albert's siblings have 2 since passed away. That picture is from his sophomore year of high school at Hamilton High, 1953, I believe. He was a sophomore, but he was actually 18 in that picture. And there he is as a little baby there on the left, and there he is with his mother on the right. While searching old newspaper articles for any mention of Albert Frost, several articles were found that ran on the Hamilton newspaper that mentioned him. A marriage certificate is located on Ancestry.com showing that on January 9th, 1959, Albert married Ida Frost Caudill in Campbell County, Tennessee. They would divorce on March 22nd, 1960. Later that year, in 1959, after Albert's father had died, he had run into some trouble with local law enforcement. On March 30th, 1959, Albert was arrested on a larceny charge for stealing contributions from an Easter seal container at Duke's Tavern. On September 8th of 1960, Albert, then 25, and with no address recorded, was fined $100 and sentenced to 30 days in jail for larceny in connection with the theft of a radio owned by his sister, Mally Hale. On July 10, 1961, an article appeared in the Hamilton paper titled, "Albert Frost Admits Looting Over 100 Cars." At age 26, again, he was charged with larceny and, when again arrested by police, provided no home address. In 1962, a notice ran in the Hamilton paper for Ida Faye Caudill and Albert Frost that a motion for the custody of Tammy Sue Caudill, a dependent minor, was filed in the Common Pleas Court Division of Domestic Relations by the Butler County Department of Public Welfare. Through research, we learned that Tammy Sue Caudill was born July 8th of 1960. In 1963, a notice ran in the Hamilton paper for a motion for permanent custody of Tammy, but now Albert's name was not mentioned. Tammy was adopted in December of 1963, and her name was legally changed. The last mention of Albert in the newspapers was in 1962. So that's the original notice there on the left, with his name tied to Ida Faye Caudill, and then the other notice there on the right, his name does not appear. All of this would not have been possible if it were not for Tina Barrett, who is here with us. Thank you, Tina. Tina is the granddaughter of Albert's sister, Bernice. Tina took a DNA test and uploaded her results to the website GEDmatch. GEDmatch is a website that allows users to upload and compare their DNA to other users who utilize different DNA testing companies. On April 12th, 2023, I sent an email to Tina, and I requested that she contact me. Ms. Barrett emailed me later that day and advised the following. She stated that her mother remembers seeing Albert. She says that he was not around much, and he would unfortunately go missing for long periods of time. She said that he always looked poor and ragged, and he was very shy and not a talker. He would answer questions, but seemed kind of uncomfortable. She stated that he always wore his Army jacket and was very proud of his military service. She stated that at one point he just stopped checking in. She couldn't remember exactly when the last time she saw him, but assumed it was somewhere around 1963. His family just assumed that he died, and he was never reported as a missing person. Albert's mother tried to help him, but he would not stay home, and she was unable to get him to settle down in any way. After his dad died, he would take off and drop in randomly and then leave. Miss Barrett felt very badly that her family let Albert disappear without a missing persons report. And she said that, they just accepted it. She told me that she felt very sorry for Albert's mother, as she lived a long life and never knew what happened to her son. Strangely, Miss Barrett told me that Albert's sister, Clara, was also a missing person, and assumed when I first messaged her that it was about Clara. In May of 2023, I sent letters to Denise Frost and Diana Frost Russell, daughters of George Frost, Albert's brother. I received a phone call from Denise Frost on May 22nd. She stated that her dad would talk to her all the time about his siblings. She stated Clara was his favorite. When George had come out of the service, he heard a rumor that his mother had sold Clara to a German man. She stated that the family rumor on Albert was that he was murdered and rolled up in a piece of carpet. She stated that he was then left on someone's porch or in someone's yard. I advised Denise that no record of his death was ever recorded. Even if he had been indigent, it would have been. I advised that no cemeteries reported grave washouts. They stated, and I concur, that Albert must have been buried in a clandestine grave. She told me that her dad had lost connection with his mother once he found out about Clara. He further advised that her dad told her that kind of speaking about Albert and Clara was almost a taboo subject after they disappeared. Miss Frost was very grateful for all the efforts that have occurred, and she stated that her father would have loved to have known that we found his brother and that someone was asking questions about his sister. On May 24th of 2023, I received a call from Carl Barrett, Albert's nephew. Carl told me that his middle name was Albert, and he was named after his uncle. He told me that he generally enjoyed being around Albert, but estimated that it occurred around 5 or 6 times max. Said Albert was a nomad and would come in and out of their lives. He'd be gone for a while and then he would just show up. He said in total he was around for about 3 months. He stated that Albert had tuberculosis the last time that he saw him, that he always had a runny nose, and estimated that he last saw him in 1963 or 1964. He described Albert as never having a roof over his head. He further described Albert as very nervous and quiet, stated he was left-handed. Said he had dark hair and was skinny. I asked him if anyone ever spoke about him or wondered where he was. He stated that he remembered the time in the 1970s and 1980s when his grandmother Ava and his mother Bernice were talking about Albert and missing him. He assumed that they took kind of an out-of-sight, out-of-mind mentality and not pursuing it further. But he knew that Albert's being gone really affected his grandmother Ava and his mother, and remembered his mother crying at night about it. He said Albert never had a full-time job and did part-time jobs here and there. He never knew that Albert was married or that he possibly had a child. He also knew nothing of his Aunt Clara and stated she was never discussed. I asked Carl if Albert had any distinct features. He said Albert was an attractive guy, but he was very gaunt. Carl also stated that Albert wore a dental plate because he was missing 1 or 2 of his front teeth. He stated that he looked up to his uncle and considered him kind of a rebel, never adhering to social structure. He stated he'd get up and go as he pleased without any change or clothes except what he had on his back. May 25th of this year, I spoke with Chester Barrett, Carl's brother. Chester stated that he last saw Albert was in 1963 or 1964 when he was about 9 years old. He confirmed that Albert had tuberculosis and walked leaning slightly to the left. He stated that he was a small-built man and never had a job. Again, he stressed that Albert's disappearance greatly affected his mother because she never knew what happened to him. At the end of June 2023, I contacted Deborah Paradise. Deborah is the daughter of Anna Frost, Albert's sister. Miss Paradise stated she remembered Albert and met him several times. She stated he was very short and thin. Unfortunately, he was often homeless and needed money. She described him as troubled. I asked her what the family rumor was on what happened to Albert. And again, she told me that Albert was murdered, potentially beat to death outside of a bar. I asked her when the last time she saw him, and she said it was between 1963 and 1964. So the Barretts and Deborah Paradise, while they are nephews of Albert, they don't communicate. So the stories of Albert, being murdered, that obviously came from two different sources. Obviously, their parents told them that at some point in the past. Based off family members' recollections and notices in the paper about his arrest, put Albert's last known whereabouts being between 1963 and 1964. No record of Albert's death was ever recorded, and he was never officially listed as a missing person. Albert's sister Claire was last known to be alive in Cleveland in 1950, as she appears in the 1950 census. However, by 1952, her husband Chester Kaprowski had remarried someone else and moved on to Pennsylvania. I estimate her disappearance to be between 1950 and 1952. No missing persons report was ever refiled on Clara, but it was relayed to me by family members that Clara would never abandon her two young children, and they suspected foul play. No reports on Clara could be located through the Cleveland Police Department. In August of 2023, Albert's niece Diana Russell took a DNA test to confirm Albert's identity. Her test confirmed her ancestral relation to Albert, and that Preble County Penny, as we've referred to, was indeed Albert Allen Frost. Each and every person involved in this case was essential for us to end up where we are today, and without this team of dedicated professionals, Albert would never have been identified. I would like to thank the following people who have provided assistance in Albert's case or provided support in the Mary Jane Vangilder investigation. Dave Lindloff and Coroner Mark Bossler, both of whom made all this possible. And I can't say enough good things about both of you. That really means a lot, everything that you guys did for us. And we couldn't ask for a better partnership between two cities. I really appreciate it. Sean McCracken, he runs the YouTube channel Mysterious West Virginia. He's done 2 videos on this case, as well as one on Mary Jane Vangilder. Sean has become a trusted ally and friend, and I appreciate all the hard work he put into researching and documenting this case. Thank you to the Preble County Library, the Eaton branch, Mark Caudill, Zach Tuggle, and Lou Whitmer of the Mansford News Journal, Lauren Pack of the Butler County Journal News, the Frost sisters, Denise Frost, Darlene Ammons, and Diana Russell, Albert's nieces, Tina Barrett, Albert's great-niece, Carl Barrett and Chester Barrett, Albert's nephews, Brian McFall, who found Albert in 1968, Deborah Paradise, Albert's niece, Olivia McCarter, Casey Conley, Brian Warders, Katie Thomas, all of Moxxy Forensic. Patty Vance, who was Ida Faye Tuttle's daughter from her 3rd marriage after Albert. Danny Hellwig and his team at Intermountain Forensics. Derek Lavasser and Stephanie Harlow of Crime Weekly and Criminal Coffee. Jen Lester from Ohio BCI. Anjanette Fisher, a friend who assisted me in locating surviving family members. My brother, Aaron Turner, who assisted in locating surviving family members. Robin Warder of the Trail Wet Cold podcast. Steve Yoder and Paula Schleiss from Ohio Mysteries podcast. Tony Geftos from ABC 13 Toledo. Ed Densel from the Unfound podcast. John Lorden from Lorden Arts podcast. Ohio State Representative Rodney Creech. The Eaton Police Department. Preble County Commissioners. Preble County Prosecutor's Office. Eli Montgomery and the Mound Hill Cemetery staff. Jeff Reinick, a retired special agent with the FBI. Kelly Bruce for the Missing in Ohio podcast. Mike Morford for the Missing Persons podcast. Mindy Wilson, Mary Jane's granddaughter. Anna Rager, Mary Jane's daughter. Mindy Wilson, her granddaughter. Anna Rager, her daughter. And Misty Griner, her granddaughter. Kenneth Atkins, which is Albert's great-nephew. Curtis Hodson, he supplied the pictures taken by Mr. Barnes in 1968. Cal Miller, author, formerly of the Toronto Star. Brian and Robert Barnes of the Barnes Funeral Home for handling Albert's remains back in 1968. Eddie Moen from the Registered Herald. Sylvia Pettim and Brittany Shock of Richland Shores. I may have forgotten a few people who have assisted us throughout this investigation. Please note that this list is not comprehensive, and if you have been involved in the case or Mary Jane's investigation, you know who you are, and thank you very much. Lastly, I need to thank Chief Lance Combs for giving me his continued support and allowing me the latitude to pursue this case to the very end. I just want to close with a few final thoughts. To those who believe that cold cases such as this are a waste of time, I have a hard time with this philosophy, that the case is too old or too cold. I have unfortunately seen cases where law enforcement has stated the case is no longer being investigated due to the passage of time. I don't know what this means. If the case is unresolved, no matter the age, it should remain open. Never give up, always reevaluate. The family of Mary Jane Vangilder still misses their mother and grandmother and desperately seek the answers to her whereabouts. I have personally seen her granddaughter Mindy weep in agony on more than one occasion about her grandmother, a grandmother that she never knew, but whose absence still affects her life. Our ancestors are our lineage back through time and our roots to this earth, and when someone is missing in that chain, it leaves a void that cannot be filled. My hope is that a detective, a police chief, a sheriff, or a coroner hears or reads about what we did in this instance and remembers an old case, an unidentified body, or an unresolved crime that needs to be reevaluated. Pull those old case files, those with pictures, evidence, and get a fresh set of eyes on the case. Consider using the technology of today, specifically forensic genealogy, to solve the unresolved. If the only way to identify an unknown individual is through DNA is to exhume, contemplate it. Replicate what we did here. Money is always going to be a factor, but look at how funds can be waived, raised, and utilized. Over 600,000 people go missing in the United States every year. Fortunately, many of those people are found alive and well, quickly. However, tens of thousands of individuals remain missing for more than 1 year. What agencies consider cold cases? It is estimated that 4,400 unidentified bodies are recovered each year, and approximately 1,000 of those bodies remain unidentified after 1 year. Medical examiners and coroner's offices reported 11,380 unidentified remains on record as of 2018. Am I disappointed that this turned out to be not Mary Jane Croft Vangilder? Of course. However, I knew from the beginning that even if this was not her, that we would identify somebody and return their name. And that alone justified everything we did here. To the family of Mary Jane Croft Vangilder, thank you for your continued support. Thank you for allowing me into your lives in the hopes of finding your mother and grandmother. I will continue to search for her. Remember that without her and without her investigation, Albert never would have been identified. She provided closure to his family. And to the family of Albert Frost, thank you for providing me with stories and facts about his life and helping me paint a picture. And finally, to Albert, I'm very sorry that it took so long to restore your name. It is a shame that you are more renowned now in death than in life. But I take solace in the fact that wherever you are, outside the stars and beyond the firmament, you are with your family. Does anybody have any questions?
If anybody has any questions, we'll try to answer them. Yes.
So has the coroner been able to determine how Albert died and what's next in the case in terms of possible criminal charges?
No, what we'll do now is we have to complete a death certificate. The death certificate that existed at the time, we're in the process of amending it. We have it done. What we're waiting on, we're having some trouble getting his military records. So I reached out to a couple contacts that I have, and they have pretty much promised me that they'll be able to get his records, because that has to go on the back of the death certificate. At that time, we'll be able to hopefully complete that.
Was there a cause of death in 1968 listed?
No, undetermined.
Okay. Will there be what will have to happen for a cause of death to be
listed this time.
But at the time, and Eaton Police met with Chief Hurd and Sizemore a couple weeks ago, and of course, it's extremely difficult to do what this guy did, and it's going to be extremely difficult to come up with something when you don't even know what the cause of death is. But if anything develops, you never know what's going to kick up from something like this. When word gets out, now that we know who it is, somebody might say, you know, hey, you remember this, you remember that, and it could lead on to something else. And at that time, we'll be bugging Chief Hurd.
Do you have reason to believe he died here? I mean,
That-
is that just something that can ever?
Officially on the death certificate, no, I don't think we have enough that we can
Okay.
put that down there because of the situation in the stream. God knows where
Sure.
it was completed at. But I will say, now that we have named this person, there are some families in Preble County with the name of Frost. I've already contacted one of them, and he couldn't talk very long because his wife's in surgery, but he just told, this is as of this morning. I said, where's your family from? He says, Hamilton. So that's something that we can pursue, and I know Adam has other avenues that he's pursuing, and hopefully in the near future, he may have something else for you.
Yeah, and I mean, and to anybody that's listening, you know, or reads about this, you know, if you know you're older and remember Albert, please reach out to me or Dave or the Eaton Police Department. I mean, even if it's a rumor or a story or a small bit of information we might not have had before. I mean, you know, we're basing a lot of this off a supposition from family recollection. You know, unfortunately, when Albert was found, he was a skeleton, so it's very hard to determine cause of death when there wasn't trauma to his bones. You know, like there's no like gunshot wound. There was no, you know, scrapes to his ribs or anything like that from a knife. There was nothing like that. So it's really hard to determine when it's a skeleton. But if anybody does remember him, you know, I'm going to continue to work it. I'm not just going to be done with it. I will continue to work with Eaton and tell them everything that I hear.
How about Butler County and Hamilton officials? Have you been in touch with them too?
I reached out to the police department there to see if they found some of these older reports, and they couldn't find them. So they didn't have them. They had like record that he was in their system at some point in the past, but as far as like the official narrative, at least when I talked to them, they couldn't
Yes,
find
sir.
it.
Is there any indication that the family of Mr. Frost plans to return to Hamilton?
Did you hear what he said? A little louder, the last part.
Is there any indication, or does the family of Mr. Frost, do they plan to relocate him back?
That's something I'm going to ask her to stick around, and we're going to have a conversation about that, what the family's desires and whatever they want. We'll try to honor that. And so that we'll have discussions with the family concerning that.
This was for Detective Turner. How, since this didn't end up being a Shelby case, how were you able to stay on this case when it's someone else's jurisdiction and this person was missing from a whole different city?
Yeah, so I mean, Dave gave me kind of the reins, and you know, it was we kind of agreed that, you know, I was going to see this to the very end. I could have easily, as soon as I found out that it wasn't Mary Jane, said, "Oh, I'm done. Here it is." I mean, there's several points at this where I could have said, "This is all yours. I'm backing out." But it was my duty, and it was our duty to find out who this person was. And then it was also our duty, once we found out who it was, is to build his backstory.
I do have some advice for any criminals out there that listens to your story. I would strongly recommend to these criminals not to commit a crime in Shelby, Ohio. To have him on your butt.
Are you specifically over cold cases there, Shelby, or do you handle
I do everything. Anything that happens, felony, misdemeanors, all stuff. This has just kind of been a passion of mine, so for a long time. So, anything else? You guys have anything? Or Ashley? I think that's it.
Okay, any other questions? No. Okay, thank you all
Yep,
for coming.
thank you.
We appreciate it very much.
Sir, could you state and spell your name for me, please?
Yeah, David A. Lindloff, Lindloff, investigator with the Preble County Coroner's Office.
David, in particular, if somebody thinks that they may have known Albert, have seen him, have come in contact with him, what should they do? Who should they call?
They're more than welcome to contact the Preble County Coroner's Office, or I'd highly recommend that they also contact the City of Eaton Police Department, and that number is 937-456-5531, and my number is 937-456-4618.
On a personal note, a case solved after 55 years. How does it make you feel?
Thrilled to death. Just closure for the family. I'm a licensed funeral director and embalmer. It's that's why I want to see that she's treated properly in the new casket, and we'll do everything we can to make it proper. He.
We're going to be doing that. Perhaps a tad maudlin, but you knew some of the people who worked on this case, as you say, back in the day.
Correct. I was a freshman at Miami University when this happened.
If they're looking down right now, what do you think they're feeling?
Well, I know they would be Tim Miller, the investigator. He was very thorough, and I think he'd be tickled to death to know that we finally brought some conclusion to this.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, we're. Oh, good. My batteries didn't run out.
That came to me twice from two different branches of the family, so it's not like they got together and came up with this story.
Right.
So I have to, a lot of this is supposition. We really don't know. We might never know. But we just kind of have to go on the stories that the family told us, and go from there. Maybe somebody else might come out and say something, that they remember him. So
Could be a long shot. Once now that his name's out there, you may have a grandfather or an uncle said, you know something? I talked to so and so back in the day. I didn't believe what they were saying, but maybe it was true. Yeah, exactly.
Well, all 3 Dayton TV stations are here, so hopefully.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Hello, Detective Turner.
Hello.
This is me in my official capacity.
All right.
All right. 5 years for you, 55 years for a lot of other people. Simple question that will probably require a not-so-simple answer. How do you feel?
Pretty good. Better now that the press conference is over. I was a little nervous, but no. Look, this took a lot of different people, and it took a lot of different people to put this puzzle together. And without, if you take one of those people out of the puzzle, out of the equation, it's not going to work, and we wouldn't have got here. So it's a big relief to me that he's finally been identified. We can give resolution to his family, who obviously have never forgotten him. He's still been on their minds. So yeah, I feel good about it. I'm happy for what we did here. I really am.
Speaking of the puzzle, still a few missing pieces. What if somebody feels that they may have a piece of that particular puzzle? What should they do?
Contact me or contact the Preble County Coroner's Office, and we'll put the information together. We'll continue kind of this running narrative that we have going here, and we'll get everything. We'll take every piece of information that can possibly come in, even if it's the small or the minute.
How can you be reached?
You can call the Shelby Police Department at 419-347-2242. You can email me at adamturner@shelbycity.oh.gov.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.